Hey everyone, my name's Drew, and we're here, and this is going to be week number 3 of the ICBA, and we're up against Jetman99 and his Australian Arcanines. And this is going to be a really fun matchup, because we both match up decently well, and it's really going to come down to the kind of mons that we bring, and the kind of, obviously, mons that we leave on the bench. But you can kind of see the matchup here, and I just do have to note that he's leaving a Steal on the bench, which does feel pretty huge, but with the kind of coverage that my Groudon could have, and the kind of team that I have built around, I do think it was a little bit difficult for the Celcio to come, although always surprising not to see it. That said, honestly, most of my building was kind of built around the Kyurem White, the Clefable, and potentially a Jolteon coming, because that can be a thorn on my side. Not too big a deal, but just something that I had to keep in mind a lot, and the Thwackey was something that I had to think about a lot. Other than that, just the heavy hitters of Crocodile and Darmanitan, that 1-2 combination made things really difficult for me, but I went all in on kind of a physical defensive strategy because really his only special attackers were the Clefable and the Kyurem White that I really had to worry about, right? And Lord, I did not realize just how strong Kyurem White is. The thing is 170 base special attack, and I was running some calcs, and really the only thing that I had to kind of deal with it was the Umbreon. So Umbreon is here specifically. It is not meant to do anything but switch into Kyurem White, and it is a pretty bad Umbreon set just on paper, but knowing that it is just here for the Kyurem White and kind of just here to manage it is really going to kind of put it into context, I think. But it's also very much worth mentioning that if this thing is just Specs Draco, it still does like 75% into fully specially defensive Umbreon, which is bonkers and something that I really don't deal with all that well. But here we are. Like I said, I did put a lot of thought in how to deal with Clefable. That's really going to be between my Groudon and my Venusaur. So honestly, I think either a physically defensive Clefable or a specially defensive Clefable are both so equally valid in this matchup. And so I have a very offensive Groudon with Soft Sand because it really does need the Soft Sand just to ensure those KOs on a specially defensive Clefable. And if it is a physically defensive Clefable, then I do have the extra belted Venusaur specifically for that, because I believe it only threatens an Oko with an extra belt and max attack modest, and Groudon has to be max attack adamant with Soft Sand to kind of really start threatening those KOs, because I really can't rely on Stealth Rocks or Chip or anything like that. So I really do need to be as aggressive as possible in these scenarios. Now, one other thing to note is that my Venusaur is overgrow this week, and that's not intentional. There was a jetting mistake, and I really did try to fix it, but I'd already been holding up my match, and I just didn't feel that it was fair to continue to try to fix it, because I kept getting errors when trying to create a chlorophyll Venusaur, and it was a struggle trying to get it done, but I couldn't get it done in time, and I didn't feel like it was worth pushing it back, especially because I had another match right after that, my second week of the UBL, which should also be coming out in a couple of days, and that one is definitely a fun one. But it just was a really difficult time trying to get a correct Venusaur, and that does affect some of the plays. Unfortunately, I was hoping that it wouldn't come down to whether or not my Venusaur is chlorophyll, but unfortunately it does affect a couple plays. And last thing to mention, my Groudon should be nicknamed Ranma. I'm not sure why it isn't. I have been watching Ranma. I am a boomer. We can leave it at that. But with that said, you guys can see that I do lead off with the Groudon. Now, Groudon has honestly kind of been a kind of safety net lead for me. It does feel like it matches up really well against most other things, and the kind of capacity that I kind of see it in as being kind of a 1-for-1 in most matchups really does kind of help me kind of visualize using this Groudon, and it just helps me kind of feel out this Groudon a little bit more. But he does lead off with the Darmanitan, which is super duper scary, because I really don't manage it well, and I believe I ran some pre-game calcs, and I believe just like a banded Darmanitan in Sun just Okos a Groudon no matter how defensive it is. So I think I'm recalling this, and I played this really carefully, and I tried to go into my Arcanine assuming that that if it is banded right, it would know those calcs, and it would go for a raw Flare Blitz, because it really has no reason not to. I really don't think you assume a lead Scarf Groudon. I think if anything, maybe you could assume that the Groudon is like Rock's lead or something, but assuming a Scarf Groudon this early on is super duper scary, and he never has Sphere anyway, because he ends up being Scarfed himself, which is spoilers, I guess, but because I don't know that yet, but all that is to say, he has no reason ever to fear it, and he can just U-turn in on my Arcanine, which again is just here to mainly check the Darmanitan. Hopefully it doesn't get too crazy, and at the very least kind of feel out what it wants to lock itself into, because I do imagine it being either scarfed or banned. Obviously Life Orb is a potential, but feels less likely than other things. In comes this Crocodile, and I believe... Well, okay, so I believe I expect this thing not to want to go for an Earthquake, but I don't quite remember how I play off of that. Going into Venusaur is a vibe. And again, I can't stress this enough. I don't know what item this Crocodile is yet, and I am not Chlorophyll. So this is a clear bluff on my end. But I think if anything, I have to assume that this thing wants to go for rocks early on, or this thing goes for a knockoff early on. Something that is not going to be the most detrimental to my Venusaur, or at the very least, my Venusaur would threaten this thing out. Knockoff is super duper strong, revealing this thing is life orbed, and that's insanely threatening here. Now, obviously, he has to assume for now that I am Chlorophyll. I'm not Chlorophyll. I can't trust it enough. I'm not Chlorophyll, but he has to assume that I am, and I think his best play here would be to go into the Braviary, and really this play is meant to kind of wear down the Braviary. I know I'm playing super duper aggressive. I know I just gave up like 3/4 of my HP on my Venusaur, like on turn 2 or 3, but I do genuinely believe that the sooner that I can wear down the Braviary, the sooner I'm going to be able to try to make inroads in this matchup, right? I do get the Sludge Bomb off, and it is a 30% chance, I believe, and we do get the Poison, which will knock it down underneath the point where Rocks on re-entry will KO the Darmanitan. So that's pretty dope, but it's still going to be a huge problem, unless I figure out a way to kind of maneuver myself correctly. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I probably did expect that Crocodile to take that free turn and click Stealth Rocks. I am kind of now panicking a little bit, assuming that I just, you know, blundered my Venusaur. But I don't know. We're trying to feel out this early game. It's going to be tough if my Venusaur goes down super duper early, but I'm going to try to deal with it. And right now I'm trying to decide how much I really need my Venusaur. And I think ultimately I have to come down on the side of, yeah, I really do need this Venusaur. Even though I have to make the super obvious play, I think I can reasonably assume that this thing is going to want a U-turn, because U-turn is pretty darn free in this moment here. But I have to make the absolute brain dead, like, safe play, because what I talked myself into here is that even though my Venusaur is a little bit more expendable because it's not Chlorophyll, it's ultimately never expendable because it has to be kind of what I choose to switch in on the Clefable, because my game plan was always, you know, I can get in on a Clefable, and if it's physically defensive, then I can KO back with an Expert Belt Sludge Bomb, which I'm not Expert Belt anymore, but it's still doing massive damage. So that's kind of what I'm thinking through here. And I kind of took me a second to kind of for all that to click, and for me to realize how big the Venusaur is, because I really cannot afford to lose to this Clefable. And so I just needed a second to kind of realize that. I make this, again, brain dead play into my Arcanine, and I believe here I try to again make a super aggressive play, assuming that this thing would want to click Stealth Rocks. And this is not a terribly intelligent play, but like I said, I have to kind of assume that this thing is going to take these free turns, but, you know, I don't quite know what kind of a position I was in here, especially when it was so aggressive earlier, when knockoffs just do so much damage to my entire team. But he does go for the Earthquake here, and I'm not feeling great about this. I'm not feeling great about this interaction. Oh, and also, I believe I ran a calc, and I believe I saw that Arcanine had a strong chance to take a life orbed, Earthquake, but I could have just completely misread the calc. I don't 100% remember the details on that calc. It could have either been a roll or I just completely misread the calc, but I believe I did take a second to calc that out and thought that I had a chance of taking it, even if it did go for an Earthquake. But regardless, this does allow me to kind of go into my Sandslash. But again, I really thought in my heart of hearts that he would try to take a turn to click Stealth Rocks there. And maybe the fact that this thing was Life Orb should have tipped me off that wouldn't be the kind of route that this match goes in, but for whatever reason, I just didn't feel it in the moment, and ultimately, you know, that's how these things happen, right? I'm in here with Sand Slash, and I'm feeling solid if I can get Stealth Rocks up, because again, the Darmanitan is going to be troubled by these Stealth Rocks. He hasn't gotten rocks up yet, so I'm not necessarily too worried about having to Rapid Spin right away. So I'm really free to just get up rocks now. That's exactly what I do. And as long as I can keep them up, then Darmanitan should not be an issue for now. So in comes the Thwackey. Thwacky's super problematic. I don't know. Oh, okay. So I guess I make another super aggressive play, and I made that decision really quickly. But I assumed he would either go for the U-turn or the knockoff. I would never in a million years assume that he would go for the Grassy Glide, even though obviously it's a super effective button. I assumed that he would kind of make a more niche play in this moment. And these predictions have not been going very terribly well for me so far. But in this moment, he does click knockoff. It does allow me to get the Super Fang off. And now, I believe, is honestly where I kind of start to realize in my head, oh, I've been kind of making these plays, kind of leaving my Mons out here in front of this Wacky. I've been leaving this Sand Slash in front of this Wacky when I kind of have a better option in my Venusaur. I believe here I go out on my Venusaur, assuming that he would want to, you know, Grassy Glide, because really after he gets a knockoff off, I think he either goes for the U-turn or goes for the Grassy Glide. And in either case, my Venusaur is really well equipped to kind of come in here, resist a hit, or just take less damage from the knockoff, and get HP back from the Grassy Terrain, and really start to threaten KOs again, because Grassy Glide is going to be quad resisted. That does, I mean, it still does 20 points of damage, which is kind of wild for a quad resisted move from a Thwackey. But in Grassy Terrain, but for sure, I'm guaranteed a whole butt ton of damage on a Sludge Bomb. And this puts me in a really strong position, because now my Venusaur is in a position where I'm going to be doing damage. This turn is either going to net me a KO or net me like half damage on whatever Mon wants to come in, and gain me HP in the process with his own terrain. But in comes this thing, which is obviously the safest play available to him. It just goes down to the rocks, and he can bring in whatever he wants, obviously. But that was always going to be kind of the situation here. So thankfully, I've traversed this Darmanitan, and even though I've been playing horribly around this Crocodile, I don't feel badly about my position, but it's really kind of dependent on a lot of things, right? Obviously. And I'm just kind of on pins and needles here, because there's so many different routes that this match can go in, and I know for a fact that it's going to be just a matter of how well I manage my resources here in order to be able to kind of do what I need to do. In comes the Crocodile. It gets the Intimidated off, and I have to make some sort of play, but I don't yet know what it is. Well, the Sand Slash, okay, I apparently just clicked super quickly, but yeah, the Sand Slash is obviously going to be kind of the most expendable member down here yet. And if it takes a turn for the Stealth Rocks, then it gives me a very free Rapid Spin on the next turn, and if he does anything else, then it allows me a free swap in on the next turn anyway, so I can kind of manage whatever has to happen. Goes for the knockoff, and Sand Slash takes out like a champ, getting off more of that, terrain back, and getting more of that Life Orb chip is what I was trying to say. But here we are. It's kind of a tough moment where I could either, you know, get an knockoff off or try to Super Fang. I felt like both were valid here, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I go for the knockoff ultimately, just kind of thinking that if he wants to switch anything in, then it just helps me out against his team, and I'm never going to, you know, KO this thing, obviously, so with my Sand Slash. So the more difficult I can make this thing, I can make it for this thing in longer game, then the better position I'll be in, you know, in the longer game. Like I said, in constructing an end game that I really need to kind of make things happen for me. Especially the earthquake, which I was very concerned when I first saw whether or not I was going to be able to take it. I take it fine. I get the knockoff off. No more life orb on this thing. And yeah, it was tough because I really did think that potentially Super Fang was the better play, depending on how many times I could force this thing to switch in and out. Maybe it's optimal for trying to wear his team down over time, but getting this knockoff off also kind of it opens up a MEW endgame that wasn't open previously, right? So that was one thing that was on my mind. Regardless, we're here, and I'm very, very likely going to go down in this moment. I don't think I did, but I probably should have gone for... I probably should have just spammed Rapid Spin. In case this thing wanted to click rocks, so that I never go down without not having rocks on my side of the field. But thankfully, he just goes for the knockoff. I was very, very afraid of rocks. I really did not want them at all. But especially because I knew that my removal was about to go down, right? So here we are. We can finally start to go on a little bit of an offensive. Bringing the Groudon. Neither of us know which of our mons are faster. Obviously, Crocodile is naturally faster, but he would have to be, you know, max speed Jolly. I can't really assume that, but I know that my Groudon, and my Groudon is a slow Groudon. It's a max HP Groudon, but he doesn't know that, obviously. I mean, I could be Scarf for all he knows at this point. I don't think I've clicked a move on my Groudon yet, but I know for a fact that my Groudon is the mon that's most equipped to kind of take a hit and then just, you know, deal out the damage that I need here. He goes out into the Thwackey. Now, here I'm able to go for the freest Precious Blades that I could possibly go for. This is Soft Sand boosted, and it's not mitigated by the grassy terrain, thankfully. So, I'm able to just get off so much damage here. And I don't KO, obviously. It's still not a great position to be in because a Grassy Glide is not great. But here I figured that my best play would be to go out into my Venusaur, try to take whatever move he goes for and try to retaliate. But it is kind of dawning on me how weakened my Venusaur is becoming, and I really can't do this forever. Thankfully, the Thwackey is getting pretty low, but it's not going to be something that's particularly good for me. Okay, goes for the knockoff. So now I've seen most of the set. Grassy Glide, knockoff, fake out. I'm gonna maybe assume U-turn. I don't remember if I saw U-turn in the match, but that's gonna be obviously the tentative prediction for right now. Oh, one other maybe niche point. On my Venusaur, I debated in the pregame building whether or not to bring Synthesis or the Roar. I ultimately went with the Roar because I thought, like, look, if I needed one final failsafe with this heckin' Clefable that's behind like a sub and it's trying to Calm Mind up, or worse, Cosmic Power up, and I just have no other options for a Clefable that's going off the rails, I can potentially have Roar on my Venusaur, and maybe he feels comfortable enough to just set up in Venusaur's face because he's so set up at that point. Obviously, with how this match looked, I should have had Synthesis 100,000%, but it was really kind of a 50-50 call. I could still imagine a situation where Roar could have been pivotal in me winning this matchup. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. It never comes into play. But obviously, Synthesis was the better bring here. Does bring in the Braviary, and Braviary kind of deals with a lot of my team, right? It wasn't until this Braviary came in where I kind of realized that's a lot of damage on a lot of my team, right? But I bring in the Mew because Mew is one of my most defensive mons. outside of Groudon. Probably should have just brought in Groudon, but this is what I did. Was for the U-turn. It does a very significant amount of damage, right? I mean, like, that feels like a lot of damage for how defensive this Mew is. Obviously, it's a Braviary. Obviously, it's U-turn on a Mew. But, dang. The only thing that I was thinking in this moment was that, look, maybe whatever he brings in, I could mitigate with grassy terrain and leftovers, but it's not a great position to be in. In retrospect, probably Groudon comes in 10 times out of 10, but in the moment, this felt more correct. It probably wasn't, to be fair. But in comes this Crocodile. Now, this is going to put us in a very interesting position, because you might have seen my Mew set in the menus, but my Mew set is a full-on setup: Iron Defense, Body Press, Roost, and something else. I don't know, Super Fang maybe. But this Mew, yeah, Super Fang. This Mew is just built to kind of deal with all the all the special attackers once they're gone, and then kind of just go ham from there. So okay, so this is actually the turn. Okay, so I need I need y'all to pay attention to this, right? So he goes for the knockoff. It does so much more damage than I would have expected. I get the Iron Defense off, and the grassy terrain brings me up to 43 HP. Now I ran some calcs. This thing is max attack Jolly, if I'm not mistaken. I am very defensive and at +2 with no item. So I'm running calcs, and I'm seeing that if I get this Roost off, then I should be okay. And this Crocodile has a 43% chance to KO. Picks up the KO. Now I need to go over this a little bit, right? Because I had every dang opportunity here. I'm actually going to pause this for a second. So once again, I'll point out that his specific Crocodile to my specific Mew had a 43% chance to KO from the range that I was at. And obviously, if I had the opportunity, I would have gone for Roost. I probably would have gone to +6 defense, because I knew just from pregame building that I needed to get to +6 in order to really threaten the Clefable. But there's really no reason why I don't get to +6, and I end that interaction with Crocodile incredibly healthy. And we saw each other's teams after the match, and without spoiling too much, because this game is far from over, without spoiling too much, I really only had to keep myself above around 50% in order to take an attack from the Kyurem and KO back with Body Press. The Braviary, once I get to +2 and beyond, is really a non-issue for dealing damage to my Mew. And the Clefable, spoiler alert, is especially defensive, which means a +6 Body Press is a 2 KO onto the Clefable, and I can absolutely get there because this Clefable is not doing much damage back to me with Moonblast alone, and it doesn't have Toxic or anything like that. So this Mew, if it took that 43% chance to not get KO'd, then I believe Mew just wins on the spot once it gets beyond +2, and I get up really healthy, like around 80ish%. I think the Mew just absolutely wins the game from this position. But unfortunately, I didn't get the roll that I really needed in this moment. That's just gonna be how it goes. But like I said, this match is far from over, and there will be some other stuff that opens up here. So getting back into things, I do go out into the Groudon here, and the Groudon, I feel like gives me the best chance to kind of make things happen for the rest of this matchup. And it does look like there's some issues, so there is a little bit of lag, but hopefully it's not too bad. So thankfully, I get out into this Groudon, and at the very least, if I clear out this Crocodile, I can clear out a path to kind of making something happen here by the skin of my teeth. So here, I just go for the Precipice Blades, I believe, or... Oh no, I go for the Rock Polish, that's right. So, Groudon was kind of my pocket win con. It was never meant to be like my main win con, obviously. I was always going to be the Mew here, but I did feel like Groudon could be a potential backup win con if everything else fails. And I'm actually running some calcs here just to see what kind of damage this Groudon could do potentially. But regardless, I'm going to end up here with a Rock Polish, and I should be faster than everything else on the team. Now, I really didn't know what speed to hit with my Groudon, so really all I ran was 44 speed EVs, and that was just meant to kind of meant to creep any potential mons that were trying to creep Groudon. and it really didn't, and I really didn't need the speed for much, and especially after Rock Polish, I really didn't know what kind of speed tier to hit, so I just kind of went with that original speed creep. I didn't think that I needed enough speed for any real aggressive Scarfers. I think really if the Darmanitan was Scarfed, then it really wasn't going to be the biggest deal in the world, or it was at least manageable enough, and hopefully I was able to manage it enough with my Mew. And my ideal situation was that, you know, I would have dealt with the Darm with the Mew at some point in my life, and or the Kyurem would have been out of the way with some combination of Umbreon and everything else in my team. That if it ever came down to my Groudon, then I have everything that I need. But in comes the Kyurem right now, and I'm running these calcs, and I'm thinking to myself, I think Groudon just wins from here, right? Because after Rocks, Precipice Blade just straight up KOs, and literally the only way that this Kyurem outspeeds me is if it's timid max speed, and it has absolutely no reason to be timid max speed, because it really doesn't help at all for speed tiers. It doesn't. Oh, and it's timid max speed. Okay, so I do have to point out that I did look up after the match, right? If timid max speed helped anything, if it helped to outspeed like Chlorophyll Venusaur or anything really like that, and it really doesn't. It was never a speed tier that I felt like I had to prepare for, but I do feel like I have to point out again that Groudon also just kind of won from here, right? Because Groudon can just destroy this Kyurem wipe. Even without Soft Sand, I really didn't have to do that much damage because of the Stealth Rocks. And I was in a good position to just KO from there, right? And if the Braviary comes in, I was outspeed it, and I just click Stone Edge. And then on that Clefable, again, that Clefable was specially defensive, which does mean the Precipice Blades 2 it KOs that Clefable. And that Clefable is doing next to no damage back to me with Moonblast. So I always get off 2 Precipice Blades pretty easily. And it even allows for misses, because if I miss a move or two in that entire formula, my Groudon is defensive enough that it can take at least a hit or two, and still had everything that it needed to kind of win out the match from there. Groudon was absolutely in the position to kind of also win out this match. It just came down to this Kyurem being max speed timid Scarf, and it just is not a great way to lose, because that is a calc that I never would have accounted for. Now, I also have to point out that really all that it took for my Groudon to still win the match was 84 speed EVs, which means that I had 44 speed EVs on my Groudon. If I'd bumped that up to 84, because apparently max speed timid Scarf was something that I had to account for, if I did have that extra 40 speed EVs, I still believe that Groudon wins on the spot. The only thing that I can't afford to miss on is the Precipice Blades onto the Kyurem, but I can even afford to miss after I land that Precipice Blades, and Groudon just wins out the match from there. Another super unfortunate way to kind of lose out this matchup, but I might honestly just kind of fast forward through the rest of this matchup, because it really is just my Umbreon, you know, going back and forth, trying to make some things happen, trying to get some damage here and there, trying to bring the differential down as much as possible. But as soon as my Groudon comes down, I am out of win cons, right? Mew is my main win con, and then Groudon was kind of my backup win con, but there really is nothing left to be done here, right? It's just down to my Umbreon, which is a bad set. Again, I cannot stress enough, it is a bad set. It is only meant to come in on the Kyurem and baton pass out and do a better matchup. It is not meant to do anything else than that. And my Venusaur, which is already weakened, it doesn't have Synthesis, it's not even Chlorophyll, right? It just can't do anything. My team can't do anything from this position here. But again, I don't feel like I played badly. I don't feel like this match was anything out of reach for me. It was just a matter of some things that I couldn't have seen coming, right? That roll was unfortunate, but that roll was ultimately something that I probably should have played out better. I probably should have been able to maneuver my Mew better overall, and kind of not put myself in that precarious of a position to begin with. But the Groudon situation really hurt, because just max speed timid Scarf was something that I would have never even crossed my mind. It would have never even crossed my mind. But here we are, and that's going to be how week 3 ends. It will be another loss, but well played game to Jetman. It was a really, really fun match. I really felt like it was back and forth, and it was just a really, really fun back and forth that I enjoyed quite a bit. But that's gonna be for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll be back really, really soon with more weeks of the ICBA and more weeks of the PBAL. Actually, I believe the ICBA will be going on a brief hiatus, and then it will be back in a couple weeks. But regardless, they'll come out when they come out. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I'll be once again out.